Okay, so we'll get started. Good morning. Was it hot this weekend? Did you stay cool? So what is BWSI? Okay, maybe it'll be louder next week. So today we have a great speaker, Professor Sanjay Sarma. He's going to talk about how we learn. But before that, I'm going to actually tell you a little story. He is one of the reasons why you are all here. So I don't, okay, let's wait for this class. That's the assistive technology. So about 4 years ago, a colleague of mine challenged me. He said the BWorks, which represents sort of the very high-end project-based learning at MIT, is a great program, but he said, what about all these kids who's not at MIT? I mean, he did actually say 5-year-old kid in Africa who may be the most brilliant engineer in the next generation, right? So I came back from that meeting, I thought about it, and we came up with a concept, sort of extending the BWorks project-based learning model to high school students. So we came up with a concept in October, and then Saturday morning, I emailed Sanjay, said, Sanjay, I have to talk to you, I have this idea. He actually answered my phone call, and so we talked, and I told him what I was thinking about, and he said, just do it. And that is how we started this program. With the Sanjay's encouragement, here we are. So with that introduction, Sanjay.
Thank you very much, thank you. Thank you. All right, guys, so listen. First of all, welcome to MIT. And I just want to tell you that what drives this place, MIT, is sort of a nuclear power that comes from inside people's brains. And I think the most compact, high-energy nuclear plant we ever have at MIT is Bob Shin. All right? All right, so listen. We are going to talk today about how we learn. And I'm going to dispel myths because it is my view that A, you've never been told how the brain actually works, which is sort of relevant if you want to learn, right? And B, you've been told a lot of things that turn out to be not correct, which is a problem. So let's start by let me ask a fundamental question. Does any of you know what it means to learn something? What does that mean? I'm going to invoke cognitive science, neuroscience. I'll throw a bunch of stuff at you. If you want details, I can give them to you later on. What does it mean to learn something? Yes, sir. To understand how it works. What else? Well, actually, that's right. So the one way you understand how things work, the one way you form memories is by the synapses in your brain to become stronger. So that's very sort of functional. Let's ask more philosophically. What does it mean truly to learn something? To able to? Very good, yeah. To teach someone else is actually a very high bar. There's one higher bar. What is that? To be able to apply it. I'll go one step higher even, which is to be able to dream it. All right? So what I mean by that is if you understand something so deeply, so fundamentally, that without even making an effort, you can assemble those building blocks in your brain and think up new thoughts, new worlds, new universes. That is the level of learning we aspire to. If you take some of the great musicians, right, that's what they're able to do. If you take some of the great engineers, that's what they're able to do. Take literature, they write in their sleep. And to get there takes a combination of actions. You have to first look at something and grok it, and it'll overwhelm you. And what happens is, over time, the brain sort of digests things, and it breaks it down. And the way the brain stores memories is very interesting. Yes, exactly. Synapses get stronger. But let me ask you another question. Do you think that a memory is stored in a particular part of the brain? What do you think? Like this talk, right? You'll have a vague memory at some point that you attended a talk at MIT. You know, is there like some neuron where that's stored?
I would assume that's stored at multiple neurons in multiple places, kind of like how computers work.
Very good. So it turns out we've discovered, yeah, go ahead. Oh my God, you guys are good. Fantastic. That's exactly right. So there is short term and there is long term, and it is in fact stored across the brain. The brain is quite amazing. When you learn something for the first time, you have RAM. It's like RAM on your laptop, right? On your computer. RAM is short-term memory. And the RAM in your brain is something called, does anyone know? Well, yeah, in your computer. But in your brain, what's the brain equivalent? Brain equivalent. It's called the hippocampus. So what happens? It's not a campus of hippopotami, by the way. It's called the hippocampus because it looks like a seahorse. And it's inside your brain embedded. It looks like a seahorse. And so it's actually not the RAM, but when you learn new things, the hippocampus acts like a traffic cop. It gets these new memories, figures out what to do, and it forms short-term memory. Now, over time, though, those short-term memories get transferred to long-term memory. And we're still trying to figure out how that happens. But we know that long-term memories are formed by a certain set of actions inside every neuron and in the connections between neurons. And it has to do with something called a prion inside the neuron, and then the neuron neurons sort of connect like this. So one neuron drops a bunch of dendrites and connects to the next neuron. And there are two types of connections. One is a chemical connection. It's like throwing in a little bit of saline liquid to form a short circuit. That's called a synaptic consolidation. And then there's system consolidation, when the neuron goes, this is really important, and it drops a second dendrite and a third dendrite. And there's a physical change in the neuron, and a long-term memory forms. And by the way, the brain is amazing in the sense that when you've learned things, it actually shards the information like a RAID. How many of you know what a RAID is in a computer? Redundant array of independent disks. It actually puts the memory in different places. And the idea is that you can recover the memory even if it's lost due to forgetting, injury, old age, whatever. You can still recover the memory. So it's the brain's fascinating. But because we are now understanding the mechanics of learning and the chemistry and the physics, what we're also understanding is how to learn and how not to learn. And unfortunately, and what I'm going to say to you now is a little bit controversial, and please don't tell your teachers I said this, the way we teach today and the way we learn today, unfortunately, is broken. Okay? So I will now lead you through a Q&A session, and I'll let you guess. Go with your instincts. Don't try and go with what you've been told. And I will tell you how learning occurs and what the limitations are. Okay. Question number one. When you learn something, let's say the professor is droning on as this professor is doing right now, right? How long do you think you can pay attention before your mind drifts off and you start daydreaming? Be honest. Come on. Be honest. All right. I need a yes, ma'am. 10 to 15 minutes. That is an honest answer. And it turns out to be absolute. Yeah. 20 seconds? Less time. Actually, that is true. That is true. And there are times when it's 20 seconds, actually, but it turns out about 10 minutes. 10 minutes. So you might say, why is it 10 minutes? I just spoke about RAM and hard drives. Why do you think it's 10 minutes? Yeah. So what happens is the hippocampus is think of this little leprechaun inside the brain, right? And the dude can only work for about 10 minutes. So what happens is, you're throwing stuff at the person, at this poor student's receiving stuff. The leprechaun, after 10 minutes, is like, I'm done. For those 10 minutes, what the hippocampus has to do is receive memories, figure out how they fit together, sort of order them a little bit, and then sort of put them in short-term memory, right? And later on, they'll go into long-term memory, but organize them a little bit. And after 10 minutes, you're done. What happens after 10 minutes? What do you think the brain does? Be honest, be honest. So look deep inside yourselves. Okay, I want to see if some of the women students speak a little bit, young women. Come on. Yes. No, you've already spoken. Someone else. Yes. What was that? Now, why do you say the brain starts wandering? I'm not disagreeing with you, by the way. I'm just curious. Okay, and what would you say? Yeah. Fall asleep? Okay. Well, sleep-deprived students, that's a smart move. Actually, that's what I would do. You know, as a professor, when I turned 40, I started snoring, okay? And that, for a professor, is really, really sort of career-defining. Because professors go to conferences so we can sleep. And the problem is, if I go to a conference and fall asleep, I snore really loudly, all right? And people like wake Sarma up. Okay. So anyway, yes, falling asleep, completely understood. It actually turns out that the mind enters a state, and I'm not making this up, called mind wandering. And so you nailed it. Literally. So that is the scientific term for it, mind wandering. And there is no way you won't mind wander after 10 minutes of learning. It's a different matter whether if you're coding, that's output. I'm not talking about input. If you're doing output, you can go for hours. Playing a video game, no problem, right? But if you're absorbing stuff, the leprechaun's busy, the hippocampus is busy, 10 minutes, brain goes into mind wandering. Mind wandering ain't so bad, by the way. Ain't so bad. Why do you think the brain goes into mind wandering? Actually, there's something called a functional MRI, where you can actually see which part of the brain is active. So, yeah.
I assume it's less training on the brain, so we can actually use more of the brain, how to store memories.
Good. Let's say more. Yep. Okay. Did you raise your hand? Someone here? No? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, try to process.
Try to process. Yep. What? That's a good point. Actually, we now know that when you sleep, when you dream, etc., the brain's doing cleanup. So there's an element of that in sleep. Mind wandering, maybe an element of that as well. Yep. Yep. Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics. That's you, man. Good. What else? Yeah.
When my brain wanders, it wanders to problems in my life that I want to solve. And it's not necessarily dumb. It actually it's pretty helpful.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I mean, a hunt does not last more than 10 minutes, does it? But also, you don't put lions in a classroom and give them lectures. They'll eat you, right? So maybe there's a reason. It turns out that mind wandering has to do with connecting the dots. And it's problem solving. It's connecting the dots. So after about 10 minutes, the mind goes into this mode where it's trying to connect the dots. And mind wandering in that sense is good. You're also creative. That's the problem solving part. You go into a creative phase. By the way, mind wandering is really good for being creative. People who are in mind wandering state can be creative. There is a downside to mind wandering. Uncontrolled mind wandering is also associated with depression. Uncontrolled. No, I'm just telling you. What happens is you get a negative thought and you sort of go around in circles, right? And you got to reset that. By the way, we don't know how to reset that, but one way to reset that is mindfulness, believe it or not. There's now research that shows that mindfulness helps you reset it. But anyway, let's come back to this. So mind wandering is a state you enter after 10 minutes. So what should you do? What should a professor do? I've completely violated all these principles, but Bob just gave me a limited amount of time. What should the professor do after 10 minutes? Yes, ma'am. Say it again.
Maybe like the output thing that you mentioned and how like
Excellent. Yeah, so, yep.
Maybe like a quick break, try reset.
Yep. Anyone else? Ma'am?
give the students recess.
Say it again. I didn't hear you.
Give the students recess.
Recess?
Yeah.
I thought you said P-sets. I was like, what? Yeah, back there in the orange.
Like a 30-second mindfulness exercise.
Actually, I haven't tried that, but I don't know. Would that work with you guys? But I would love that. I would love that. Actually, that would be really good. By the way, if for those of you who are interested, do some research on mindfulness. It's very interesting what we're discovering about it. And I recommend, but you can do 30 seconds. You got to do a couple of minutes. Yep. Okay. So it turns out at the end of 10 minutes, when your mind is beginning to wander, what you need to do is, because remember, stuff is in your short-term memory, right? And it's full. So it's very strange. You take a break and you probe your short-term memory. And that promotes transferring stuff from short-term to long-term. So the way you do that, the ideal way for me to do that would be at the end of 10 minutes to stop and start asking you questions related to the things you've learned so far. So what's the name of that thing in the brain where short-term memories are the quarterbacked? Not the hippopotamus. Hippocampus. Yeah, hippocampus, right? So by doing that, what I did to you is I promoted your searching the short-term memory. I'm not giving you more information. I'm asking you to probe your own short-term memories, right? So now what I need to do, if I had my druthers, is go to each one of you and ask you questions and probe a little bit more, right? So for example, I might say something like, what's mind wandering good for? What else? What else? That's not good, right? So, but I would have to go to each one of you. And coming back to the lady in orange, I might also say, listen, take a break and maybe do a mindfulness exercise. Maybe you're stressed about whatever, right? It's got to be very personalized. There's no way we can do it in a classroom. So what do professors and teachers do? Just roll on like bulldozers because it's more convenient. Okay, so now I ask you, so the thing I should really be doing, this is called the testing effect, is at the end of 10 minutes, I should ask you questions about the things you learned in the last 10 minutes, and that actually promotes memory. Now let's say I have 50 questions in my back pocket. After 10 minutes, I take a break. By the way, if I also had my druthers, I'd probably make you do something with that work that you just learned. So if you learn something about AI, do a little project on a very tiny little thing, because action also promotes making your memory strong, right? Okay, so let's say I have 50 questions in my back pocket. Should I ask you 10 questions in that after the 10-minute lecture and keep the other 40 in my back pocket, ask you 50 questions right away, ask you 10 questions, let you sleep, wake you up the next morning, shake you awake, and ask you the remaining 40 questions? What do you think I should do with it, the 50 questions? What should the schedule of questions be? Yeah. Good. Okay, so now I have 49 questions left though. And I wrote those questions and I need to ask you those questions at some point, so give me a schedule, but I do agree with you. Yep. 10 questions every 10 minutes? But okay, so I gave a 10-minute lecture on something. I can now ask you 10 questions. I'm going to give you a 10-minute lecture on something else, but I still have 40 questions remaining. So now I'm going to ask you 10 minutes questions about the stuff you learned. I have 40 more. So what should I do with these remaining questions? Yeah. Very good. Did you just make that up? How do you know about that? Fantastic. You're exactly right. Okay? It turns out, that's exactly right. Yeah. So that is called spaced retrieval. So there was a German psychologist by the name of Ebbinghaus, and he, 100 years ago, locked himself, he's a bit of a nut, by the way, he locked himself in an attic in Paris, and he would teach himself nonsense words, like just random words, and then every day, see if he remembered them. And he found that, obviously they would forget some. So it wasn't exponential, but it was sort of like a curve like that. So that's called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, right? But then he discovered something very strange. If those remaining 40 questions, I keep them in my pocket. But if I could detect when you're about to forget those questions, forget stuff, exactly when you're getting rusty, not you've already forgotten them, not that when they're fresh, but when you're getting rusty, if I ask you 10 more questions, you'll go back to 100%. And now the curve becomes shallower. You forget more slowly. And now you forget slowly. So the first time maybe you became shallow, you forgot stuff within a day, the next time within a week, the next time within a year, within a month, right? So if I can space out, but I have to detect when you're about to forget it, you will remember better. So forgetting is a fundamental part of learning. Not strange? Now tell me why that would make evolutionary sense. Why would it make evolutionary sense for the brain to want to forget? Excellent. 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 So let's say that you go for a hike. It happens to me all the time. I go for a hike, and I'm accosted by a dangerous-looking animal, perhaps a bear, right? And then I go, whoa! I don't know what to do. First, I try and talk to it politely. It doesn't go away. Then I try and reason. That doesn't work. Then I go, whoa! And then it runs away. And I realize that, whoa, that made the bear run away. If this happens to me only once in my life, it's obviously not useful. So the brain is actually incented to forget it. But within a week, if it happens again, and I go through the process and I realize this made it run away, the brain's like, this dude runs into bears a lot, right? So it increases its priority. That's called spaced retrieval. Now, the way we actually reproduce this, not just in humans, but even in fruit flies. Even in fruit flies. It's how neurons work. We are incented to forget stuff. For example, this morning when you left your room, when you turned the faucet on to brush your teeth or whatever, I hope you brushed your teeth, good idea. Right? When you turn the faucet on, I tried this a few years ago and people were like, nah, we didn't brush our teeth. It didn't work. Do you remember the temperature of the faucet, of the knob? No, you don't. Because if you remembered all the stuff, your brain would sort of fill up with all sorts of junk. So the brain is incented not to notice and also to forget, right? So if you space out learning, you will remember. And the neuroscience behind it is the following. When you learn something for the first time, the neuron does not actually drop a second connection. It just uses a chemical connection. As the chemical, think of it this way, I'm being loose with my terminology, as it dries up, but before it's gone, if I remind you of it, the brain's like, this is important, and it drops a second dendrite. So it actually physically forms a memory. So when you learn something, forgetting is okay, but just about the time you're forgetting, if you remind yourself, you'll remember longer. And you have to do this a few times. Okay, here's another one. When you learn something, so let's say that you're learning how to calculate I'm looking at the time to make sure that I'm on time. Let's say you're learning how to calculate the surface area of a cone and the surface area of a sphere. What's the surface area of a sphere, by the way? Okay. Good. Good. So let's say that you're in middle school and you're learning it, all right? So should I teach you let's say I give you problems. Should I give you cone, 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 sphere, 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 or cone, sphere, cone, sphere, cone, sphere? What do you think? Why? Why? That's right. It turns out the brain learns on differences. So if I give you cone, 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 but the third cone, there's no difference. You're just mechanical. But if I make you switch, I'm increasing the difference in the brain. The brain looks for edges, and I've given you more edges, so you learn better, right? But how is every textbook written? The section on cones, the section on spheres, right? So I've given you only 3 or 4 principles, but right here you can see that when you learned, unfortunately, our systems are set up to violate these very fundamental principles. 10-minute lectures, individual questioning, spaced retrieval, where I ask you about something you learned last year, or maybe last week or last month, right? And interleaving, that's called interleaving of learning. So everything that the brain wants is what we don't give it, right? So you guys are all really bright, and now I'm going to tell you one final thing, and I'll wrap up and we'll do Q&A. You guys are all really bright. You have an opportunity to make sure that you teach yourself this way. There's a reason that Khan Academy took off. How many of you have used Khan Academy? Okay. Do you know Sal Khan got 3 degrees at MIT? Why do you think Khan Academy took off? Because, because it's video. You can't pause me. You can't be like, hey, shut up. Don't. I won't give you lunch. Right? But the point is, you each want to pause me at different points. But the moment you put it on video, you can pause it. Right? And his videos are short. And then he has questions. So without even realizing it, what video did was it enabled some of the stuff. And students like you gravitated towards it, not because you knew the science, but because you're human, most of you. And you found it, you found it more natural, right? That's why Khan Academy. How many of you use Quizlet? Quizlet's an MIT guy too. Do you know that? I'm not kidding. Andrew Sutherland dropped, and we know him very well. Like I know him very well. He dropped out of MIT. Right? 2 years into his career at MIT, he found that his website had exceeded the Wall Street Journal in the number of hits per day. So he's like, oh, I guess I should leave and do this. So he left and did it. But he still comes back, right? But what does Quizlet do? Quizlet lets you do retrieval, interleaved, space, gamified, right? It's amazing. Now I'm going to tell you the final thing, which is what brings you here. So here's the thing. You learn through your eyes and through your ears. Do you learn through your fingers? How? Sense of touch. What else? Does doing have anything to do with learning? Why do you think that is? And is the answer yes? Yeah, go ahead. What does that mean? Yeah, keep going, keep going. This is the lady of the cognitive psychology background. Yeah. That's great. And why is that? Good. Keep going. Keep going. You're on the right track. Keep going.
And it could be something similar to muscle memory where you
Yeah.
can do something without really
You guys are so good. I wish I could. Is this being recorded? Okay, this is great. Yeah. That's great. So you guys are great. So let me explain, right? First of all, there's a difference between learning just to produce abstractly and applying. And the act of not just inputting, but actually putting stuff out is fun, and using it on demand is fundamentally different than simply learning it just to reproduce it in an exam. Because when you reproduce stuff on demand, you have to connect knowledge in ways unpredictably that an exam cannot imitate. You have to problem solve. And that's one of the reasons you're here for your amazing projects. Because in the process of building a CubeSat, you will remember your physics. You will remember maybe something you learned in programming. You will remember something that you learned in math, right? So it'll evoke. It's sort of like questioning you after 10 minutes, but at a much grander scale. That's one thing. But the second thing, who said muscle memory? Yeah. So it turns out that when you actually do something, an entire different side of the brain gets engaged. It's the motor part. It's actually quite literally muscle memory. So there's a professor, she was at the University of Chicago. I read her paper a few years ago. She's now actually, I think, the president of Barnard College. Her name is Shan Bialak, and she did this amazing study. What they did was, I've forgotten the exact numbers, but you get the idea, is they took a class that's split into two halves, randomized control trial. So in other words, one group gets an experiment, the other group doesn't, but they're selected randomly so that there's, you can see if the effect is real. So the first group is taught, I think, angular momentum. I'll make up the numbers. I don't remember the exact numbers. Let's say for 2 hours. How many of you know your angular momentum? How many of you have angular momentum? I'm kidding. None of you do. Okay. Huh? What was that?
Relative to the side of the Earth.
You're right. Yeah, we are turning. Yeah. So she teaches one class angular momentum for 2 hours. The other class she teaches only for 90 minutes. Again, the numbers, I'm trying to make the point here. I don't think the numbers are right. This is from my memory. Now, the other 30 minutes, she has them hold spinning bicycle wheels. And if you try and do this or that, the wheel fights back, right? The second class learns better, although they got less instruction, because in doing that, some other part of the brain was woken up and connections were made. And what is that part of the brain? So with MRI, functional MRI, they discover it's the motor cortex, or the part of the brain that takes care of motion. So doing is a very fundamental thing at MIT. So I'm going to end by insulting Harvard. Okay. All right. So Harvard was established in 1635. It's a long time ago. So it's a great university. But Harvard was, it started with a religious school, and then it gone to other schools. But the whole thing was to learn science in Latin, so that you could, talk about it. In 1861, the charter was created for a new institution down the street, MIT. This was just before the Civil War. And it was actually, the first class came in 1865. And the whole point of MIT was, the workshop is where the learning happens. And the MIT saying to this day, is mens et manus. How many of you speak Latin? Having just insulted Latin. Which means, what does mens et manus mean? Mind and hand. So the whole point of MIT is just do it. Build it. Nike, right? Build it. That's why I like the Nike logo a lot, by the way. I like the whole Nike thing, right? Just build it. And in the act of building, you will learn better, you will make an impact on the world, you will discover, right? You will invent, and once you get going, you cannot be stopped. And so again, welcome to MIT. The whole point of this place, the whole point of what you're doing is to embody. By the way, you know what that learning is called, where you learn with the motor side of your brain? It's called embodied cognition. Not just cerebral, not just abstract, embodied cognition, right? And when you get to that state, that's when you can dream it. That's when you will be thinking about it without even realizing it. When you get to that state, you have arrived. And this is the place that someone like Bob, who is embodied cognition on 2 legs, right? You want to talk about radar, for example. This man, he can see electromagnetic waves. You can all see them, but he can see them from the side. RF, different spectrum. If you want to really, really get that, this is the place to be. So welcome, thank you, and have a really wonderful time. So Bob says we should do some Q&A. Bob. So questions? Yeah, start in the back. You, the lady in the orange.
So you talk a lot about
Speak up a little bit.
sorry, you talk a lot about muscle memory and all that. And do you think in the future we'll be able to have schools almost like vocational schools where you're doing actual hands-on learning?
Oh, yeah.
Through that for all subjects, for not just trade, but for traditional education as well?
Yeah, so a couple of answers. One is when Sal Khan did Khan Academy, one of the things he said is you should flip the classroom. And the reason is that students will learn the stuff online, and when you come into the classroom, have them do something with it, rather than sitting there and just listening passively while the teacher drones on. Actually, my daughter, who's 17, so same age as many of you, she's doing an internship in Europe right now, actually. She was learning Spanish, and her Quizlet was big at that time. So her friends would all learn Spanish before they came into school. And so the teacher was like, I can't teach them Spanish, they already know it. So he made them write skits. And it became the most popular Spanish class in the school. So yeah, absolutely. And by the way, final comment, vocational schools will come back. Votech is amazing. We actually look down on it, I'm not sure why. And you know what is a very famous vocational school that you know about? We were called the little vocational school down the river. We were very proud of it. Okay, yeah, go ahead, sir.
So one of the most common techniques that's based upon this research is what's called the Miller technique,
Yeah.
which is like 25 minutes of learning and 5 minutes breaks.
And Miller is actually more applied to tasks than learning. But you should dial it down to 10 minutes.
So my did you like increase that 10 minutes in a week?
Good question. So a lot of people think, oh, if I practice, I can increase that 10 minutes to 15 minutes because it's like a brain, the muscle's like the brain's like a muscle. Some aspects of the brain are like a muscle, right? Some are not. That is not. It turns out. Maybe 10, 11, 12, but you can't double it, right? Just like your eyes. You can do exercise to make them slightly better, but you can't, be Superman, right? Yeah.
Kind of building off of that, so how does your brain work for, you mentioned about 10 minutes concentrating, like doing
In learning, not in doing, in learning, yeah.
So how does that relate to testing?
Yeah, so I think that, first of all, tests are good and tests are bad. Let me explain. The thing about tests is to test all the time. So remember I said after 10 minutes you should be asking questions. That's a form of a test. Those are called formative tests. In other words, they help you form memories and form learning. The problem we have today is one of too many summative tests, high stakes, SAT, It's okay, you need to do them. But you should be asking yourself questions all the time. You should be asking each other questions all the time. So think of the test as something you swim in. You're always test taking, right? Not waiting for that big test. You see what I mean? Because accessing your RAM promotes digesting information. Okay, let's go to this side first. Yeah. Say it again.
Cornell method, like taking notes?
What is oh, that's just a note-taking method. So let me just explain. I won't talk about the Cornell method, but I'll take a step back. You know a lot of people, when they read a book, and they go back and read the book again with a highlighter. I used to do that. I had 3 colored highlighters. I'd highlight the book. Not nearly as effective as going to the end of the chapter and answering the questions. So note-taking is good, and the Cornell method is a way to organize the note-taking process, so that's good. But what's better is if you can, who said teach out someone else? If you can use those notes to teach someone else, that's called elaboration, that's actually very good. So it's not the note-taking, it is what you do with the notes. If you can teach someone else, that's really fantastic. Find someone on the street. Hey, let me tell you something. Yeah. For what? Instincts, that's a much bigger question, right? And instincts are, that's a hard question because some instincts are like, for example, we have reflex instincts, right? And some are more sort of bigger instincts. And a lot of instincts are really horrible instincts, right? Human beings can be pretty nasty to each other as we know and as we're seeing, right? So instincts, it's a belief system, it's a reaction system. There's a whole bunch of work on thinking fast, thinking slow. There's a Nobel laureate, Nobel Prize given to Daniel Kahneman for it. So it's a whole other shebang. I don't think I can do it justice right now, but if you're interested in the book, look for a book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, and also look for a book called Blink, and that has to do with instincts. Okay, so this section, yeah, so.
So, going back to the depression thing. So I read up that the brain actually changes its shape when you're a depressed person. So I was wondering if that change in shape maybe makes you more I can't think of the word.
Prone?
Prone, yeah,
Yeah.
prone to
Yeah, look,
sorry.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm not at all an expert on it. I simply said mind wandering is related to depression. All I'm saying is that sometimes mind wandering is when you're going, it's good often, but sometimes the same thought, like a negative thought, goes around in the mind. I don't know if there's a change in shape involved. I think if you mean a neurological change, which is some fundamental change, yes, that's known, injuries, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't want to go there because I'm really not an expert. Okay, so I'm not the person. Yep.
So if you have like 10 minutes of focus time, what happens if you like pass the 10 minutes? Like do you start forgetting the first like 3 minutes and add
It's
more?
something worse. Yeah, there's actually two little things I didn't mention. One is, it's actually the same thing really. It's the illusion of learning. You have the illusion of learning. You feel the material seems familiar, but you're actually not learning. Which is worse, because you're like, I got it. No, you don't. You don't got it. Right? My grandmother had this expression, and I'm sure this is true I grew up in India, but it's true in pretty much every culture, which is, you're not paying attention, stuff is coming in from one ear and going out of the other. Right? You all heard this, right? It's true. We can actually see with a particular type of instrument, we can see the information coming in from here. Right? Yeah. Yeah, so there are dyscalculia, very good. Yeah, so there's a bunch of learning. See, first of all, I don't like the term disability. Let me explain. Reading is a modern thing. I mean, 200 years ago. I mean, how many of our grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents, 200 years ago, spent any significant amount of time reading? They were probably farmers or cobblers or workers or whatever, right? Reading is a new thing. The brain wasn't designed to read. Now, what we do is we actually hijack a part of the brain to read. And that part is good at sequencing. It just so happens that some people map reading to a different part of the brain, which is not as good at sequencing. And we can see that in an MRI. Actually, we can detect dyslexia way before it becomes apparent in the classroom. And today, the way we deal with dyslexia is all messed up. We'll make the students do the very thing that they struggle to do. You can actually address dyslexia by changing, in some cases, the spacing between letters and the distance between sentences. And most special ed teachers don't even know this. Why doesn't the Kindle come with a dyslexia font? And actually, there is something called a dyslexia font, which turns out to be junk. It's something some dude made up. There is actually scientific evidence of what works, and we don't apply it. So dyscalculia is similar. Dyscalculia is the struggling with math. It also has to do with sequencing. It's highly correlated with dyslexia. ADHD is another one. These are all modern discoveries because we're asking the brain to do things that it wasn't designed to do, and some people do it differently. I think, this was before this was commonly understood, I think I had ADHD. And it actually helped me, actually, because I was, sort of connecting the dots in ways that maybe the others couldn't. So, but we are understanding them. And I think we need to fundamentally destigmatize these disabilities. We shouldn't even call them disabilities. And I don't mean that in some politically correct way. I think these are just people are different. And if they're different in one way, they'll be different in another way. And this diversity makes us stronger. That's sort of my view of it, right? So let's go to a different section of the audience. Yes. Say it again? Yeah. Yes, we need to rewrite them. I think some textbooks are awesome. A lot of them, look, I mean, the textbooks are written by great people putting a body of knowledge down and a little bit of scaffolding of if you go this way, you'll get it. But to really learn, it's like turning a textbook. It's like turning a novel into a screenplay, right? So we need to do that. So and I'm the vice president for open learning at MIT, and we produce online courses. And we're trying to figure out how do you redo the textbook into visual and video and audio and content so that it's more like a screenplay. So yes, I think we do need to. And in some ways, those of you who use Quizlet or Khan Academy, you're sort of reconstituting a learning environment for yourself, which is not just the old textbook. Right? That's what you're doing, and you're using your own instincts. And you're all smart people, so you figured out some good ways to do it. Right? Yes, ma'am. So repeat the question.
What? Oh yeah, so you're talking about how the brain forgets some things because they're not like important for our life. Do you think that's actually important for some of the things we learn in school? Like, I'm never gonna have to know like when Warren G. Harding was elected president. Do you think I should?
That's a super important question. Well, yes. I mean, so by the way, you remember I did retrieval testing. So if I at the end of a lecture on, I don't know, the Revolutionary War, or let's say if I did a lecture after the Civil War, I said, what was the color of the buttons of this Confederate soldiers? Then I'm, whatever, what? Do you know the answer? Brass. Yeah, brass, whatever, right? So, but if I ask you, I'm focusing your attention on that. Now, in terms of, presidents, et cetera, you still get a gestalt. You still have a big picture. And you may forget the details, but you know that this sort of happened, that sort of happened, and the details fall off. But it's important when we teach to give the larger arc, right? What led to the Civil War? What led to, why was there a Boston Tea Party? All that stuff. So you got to give the bigger picture, and hopefully that's what you retain. But if I bore you with the minutiae, you lose the big picture, and then that's bad. So you got to, that's what I mean, that's the screenplay part, which is how do you write it in a way that you remember the things that are important. And you can relearn the things you need as you need them, right? Yeah, let's see, let me just see the time here. Okay, let's make that the second last question, yeah. What I describe is, yeah. Yeah. That's, my God, such a profound question. Okay, I've been in like TV interviews and they don't ask such profound, deeply thought out questions. That's great. We do have something now that we didn't have 10 years ago. We have online. And all of you have used Khan Academy. We have assessment systems, Quizlet. How many of you use Scratch to learn programming? Scratch. That's from here, right? App Inventor. That's from here, right? So my point is, the old frame was all you had was the teacher who were amazing. They did a great job given what they had to do and their scale. But now you have all these other things coming in, right? So I think we have an opportunity to rethink it. Right? Okay, last question. Ma'am. In what way did it suck?
So I was in my physics class, and the teacher did it. We did it at the beginning of the year, so we kind of shift to arithmetic, but like we kind of just do fill-in notes.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah. So here's the deal. When we learn something new, flip classrooms. We assume, all I have to do is put the lecture online, and we'll just flip the classroom. Nah. Because the flipped classroom, there's a technique, right? There's how do you set the classroom up? How are the tables arranged? How are the exercises? How do you help the students when they go through the exercises, right? How do you scaffold it? And if you don't think it all through, it's going to fail. Just as a teacher who walks in and does a traditional classroom with no training is going to fail. So the problem is we don't have a best practice for flipped classroom. That's what we're working on here. And that's beginning to happen, though. So for example, Senor Tran, my daughter's Spanish teacher. Only in America can someone with the wonderful name of Senor Tran, Vietnamese, be one of the national leaders in teaching Spanish. Beautiful. Senor Tran figured out it was skits that solved the problem. If he had flipped it another way, it might not have worked. So there is a technique, and we are figuring it out. And that's part of the challenge to the question that the gentleman in the red T-shirt asked. Okay? All right, guys, thanks very much. Enjoy lunch. Thank you.